Today on the Capitol Show, we speak with one of the most influential and defining voices in America's immigration debate, Mark Krikorian. He's the executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies in Washington, D.C. This conversation comes at a pivotal moment as the United States prepares for a major reset in immigration policy under President Trump's agenda for 2025 and beyond. Mr. Krikorian, you are most welcome. My first question, let's do a big picture about your description for the current state of U.S. immigration policy. What do you believe is the biggest misconception Americans have about the crisis at the border?
Well, I'd say the biggest misconception people now have is that the problem is fixed because President Trump stopped the disaster at the border itself, literally within days. I mean, so it's been almost a year. And the crossings at the border are at the lowest level, really, they say since the 1960s. But back then, we didn't really know how many people were coming over. We didn't have cameras everywhere. I think it's more likely the lowest level since the 19th century. I mean, it really is remarkable. But the misconception is that that means the problem is solved. And the fact is it's not. It's not just that there are millions of illegal immigrants that Biden let in, but that there are always going to be new immigration problems. For instance, the new frontier for illegal immigration is people overstaying their visas, coming in legally, and then just not leaving. And the administration knows that. I mean, they're working on those issues as well. But like I said, the main point is that I think people need to take away is that this isn't solved. This is just the worst part of what Biden created. It hasn't been fixed, but the problem overall is still with us.
Yeah, let's talk about the recent attack in Washington, D.C., where an Afghan migrant opened fire on National Guard members. That incident shocked the country. From your perspective, is this incident an outlier, or does it expose a deeper systematic failure in how the U.S. they vet these people, they track these migrants? They are under emergency immigration program. What is your point of view here?
Yeah, there's definitely it exposes real problems. With vetting, the way I think about it is there's three basic problems with vetting. One is the places a lot of people come from just don't have the kind of information that you need for vetting. In other words, there's no Department of Motor Vehicles in Mogadishu to check somebody's information. Afghans, some huge percentage of Afghans who came in since the fall of our regime there put January 1st for their birthday because they don't even know when they were born. I mean, it's that backward a place. So number one, vetting is only as good as the information. And if you're vetting people from places where there is no information, then the vetting is meaningless. The second problem is that there are places where the government is more organized and competent, but they're enemies of the United States, so they're not going to tell us anything. Iran or Cuba are not going to give us valuable, useful information to check people's background. And the third problem is that the kind of vetting we're doing is looking for rapists and terrorists and what have you, and that's good. Obviously, we need to do that. But there's cultural vetting that we don't do. Because people we're getting from places like Afghanistan and Somalia don't really understand what a modern society, let alone a modern Christian society, is like. They have no idea. And so they think it's perfectly normal to rape little boys or whatever. And I'm not making this up. I'm not being alarmist here. And so my point is we don't even do the kind of vetting, or at least add to the kind of vetting that we need to do, which is like ask people, do you think it's okay to kill people who leave their religion? Do you think it's okay to chain your wife to the stove or whatever it is? Those kind of basic questions we're not even screening for. So vetting
Mm,
is really just
mm-hmm,
kind of kabuki theater. I don't know that it actually does much good.
mm-hmm. What do you think about the action and the strong action that Secretary Kristi Noem announced after the attack? Like she include expedited removal for high-risk paroles, enhanced biometric screening, and a nationwide review of migrants admitted under emergency program. Do you believe these steps are enough to restore public confidence in the immigration system?
They're not enough. They're something. I'm not
Mhm.
against them in any way, and they will probably do some good,
Mm,
but they're half measures. They're partial. They will do a little bit of good, but they're not going to address the basic problem. And I don't think they're going to be restoring the public's faith in the immigration system because, I mean, look at what's happened with all these Somali fraud, for instance, in Minnesota. This kind of vetting wouldn't have caught that kind of thing. These are people from, this is sort of my cultural vetting issue here, because
mm,
these are people who come from a place very based in kind of clan loyalties. They have no conception of neutral rule of law, where there's
mm,
rules that apply to everybody and everybody is supposed to follow them. And you kind of internalize that idea. That's
mm.
an alien thing to them. It doesn't really matter how much screening you do if you're not screening for that sort of thing. So, like I said, the measures the administration has announced are useful as far as they go, but I don't think they're actually going to address the basic problem.
Yeah, so we need far more aggressive overall under President Trump.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And we need to, and the administration is kind of moving in this direction. We need to basically say, look, if there are places like Somalia or Afghanistan, I
Yeah,
would add probably Yemen and maybe some other places where vetting simply doesn't mean anything, then we have to say, look, we can't vet these people, so we can't let people in from those places, period.
yeah, yeah. Maybe adjusting in some of a questionnaire, a big questionnaire about their life. I don't know if this could help, but
Sure, there's things like that you could do. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
The thing is that their immigration lawyers will coach them on what they're supposed to say. So it's a
yeah.
little hard to get around.
Okay. You talked about the border, it's better now. What about legal immigration? You often argue for reducing legal immigration with the strongest economic case for what is the strongest economic case for lowering admission numbers? Is it
Uh,
happening
people
now?
talk, yeah, people talk about high immigration is legal immigration is beneficial because the economy needs it and all of that.
Mm,
What it leaves out, though, what less immigration would do, yes, probably the GDP in the short run would grow more slowly.
mm,
But what's important is the GDP per person, not some average big number that includes everybody. And the economic benefits of less immigration is would go actually disproportionately to people at the bottom of the labor market. People either who aren't in the labor market now, who would pull them in. In other words, they're not unemployed, they're just not even looking for work. Help pull them in, but also people, for instance, who have a hard time getting jobs through no fault of their own, or at least no direct fault. For instance, if you're a ex-con, you were in jail for 18 months for dealing drugs or something, and now you're out. You want to rebuild your life. You're going to have a hard time finding a job when there's lots of immigration. When the labor market is tighter, which means there's fewer people chasing the same jobs, you're going to have a much better chance of rebuilding your life. Now, half of those people are dirtbags. They're going to end up back in jail. Absolutely. I mean, employers are in a tough spot there. But what about the other half who do want to rebuild their lives and have a hard time because they're now competing with all these immigrants? So tightening the labor market is the big benefit economically of less legal immigration.
What about the asylum system? Does it become unmanageable by design, or it is simply outdated and abused?
Yeah, I don't think it's design. I think it's outdated is the issue because the asylum was created to clean up the mess of World War II and the Russian takeover of Eastern Europe. In other words, lots of people were out of their countries, had fled all kinds of things, a total mess. So
Mm,
they created the asylum rules for Europe to deal with the consequences of the war and its immediate aftermath. What happened in 1967 is they signed a new UN treaty. This is the one we signed, the US signed, which
Mm,
applied those rules to the whole world. And that's where the problems come in. But in 1967, it was the Cold War. There wasn't much asylum. It was mainly for, Russian ballerinas who were
mm,
defecting. In other words, the numbers were very small.
mm,
What's happened with the end of the Cold War, the end of the European colonial empires, the cheap transportation now that we have, is that it's become the main vehicle for illegal immigration, not just here in the US, but to Europe, Australia, Israel, all kinds of places are dealing with this.
mm.
And we need to fundamentally change our conception of what asylum is. So, absolutely, it's an anachronism. We need to start from scratch.
Yeah. In your opinion, what is the single most effective legislative change Congress can do, could pass today to fix the immigration system?
Well, the whole immigration system, I don't know, lowering numbers is probably the best thing because the smaller the
Mm,
problem you have to deal with, the easier you can deal with it. But as far as specific like enforcement measures, the most important I think would be to get out of the UN Asylum Treaty, the Refugee Treaty. That's something the president could do on his own, and then Congress would need to change the law, the 1980 Refugee Act. And the way I think it needs to be changed is that there is no asylum. Is that, in other words, the executive develops relationships with other countries. I call it remain in Mongolia, but it doesn't have to be Mongolia. It could be anywhere. So that if you come and say, hi, I want asylum, I fear persecution, you automatically are sent to another country and apply for asylum there. Because almost everybody making an asylum claim in the United States is doing it because they want to be in the United States,
mm,
not because they want to get away from persecution. Because if you were in Auschwitz and you managed to escape, you don't care where you go. In other words, if you're genuinely seeking protection from being killed and tortured, Cambodia or Mongolia or Botswana are, pretty good. Sure, of course you'd rather be in the United States. But asylum isn't to make your life, ideal. It's to
But
keep it.
this country don't give what the US can give. It's like the US
Yeah, yeah,
and
that's the point, is that people, I mean, the people under Biden, millions of them who were applying for asylum or at least pretending to apply for asylum, they came through 3, 4, 5, 6 different countries before they got here. They weren't being persecuted in Mexico. They just didn't want to stay in Mexico. They wanted to come to the
Mhm.
United States. Even people flying in, you have people from Africa or the Middle East who fly in from Europe. They go to Europe, fly to the United States, and they say they want asylum. I'm sorry, you should have applied in the first place that you were safe.
Yeah,
And
maybe
they didn't.
Europe or UK or whatever. So
Right,
uh,
exactly. Now that's bad for them, but that's their problem. Let them deal with it.
you don't want, yeah, maybe, yeah, President Trump gonna fix this issue. You've said that the media mispresents the immigration problem. What is the biggest truth the public never hear about?
I think I wouldn't say never heard about, but don't really think about maybe, is that there are hundreds of millions of people in the world who would move here if they could. And under Biden, we saw many millions of them taking advantage of that. There have to be, we have to be able to say no
Mm,
and to back that no up by sending people back. This is also Europe's problem. They have let all these illegal aliens in. They
mm,
apply for asylum. They're turned down for asylum, and then they never sent home. They never leave. And so the basic thing I think people need to, and I think people kind of know this without thinking about it, but it needs to be hammered home, is
mm,
that there is no limit to the number of people who would come here, so that you have to be able to say this many, no more. If you break the rules,
mm.
have to go. No sob stories, no baloney, nothing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the media is just, they're in the business of sob stories.
Yeah, President Trump said that he will only limit the asylums for 7,500 applications per year and only from South Africa. Is it true?
That's for refugee resettlement, which is different. Refugees, they're the same idea. In other words, asylum and refugees are both for people who claim to be persecuted.
Mm,
But refugees are people that we decide to let in. Asylum is for people who break in and then say, you have to let me stay. You see what
mm.
I mean? So they're different things. So the South Africa thing is for refugee resettlement. And I don't know,
But
I wouldn't even go ahead.
yeah, your research during the Trump campaign in the first term was very heard by President Trump himself, and yeah, particularly by President Trump. Now, when you see, his mind or his agenda, does he differ, or there is difference between illegal asylum and legal asylum? I mean, or for
Um,
him, it's all the same, the same.
Yeah, I mean, it is in some sense legally similar. It's sort of geographically different. But no, I think it is very much the same. The thing that I am concerned about with regard to the president is not really illegal immigration. He gets all of the different pieces of that, whether it's the border, asylum, whatever it is, he is genuinely committed to that. That's not just political talk. The
Mm.
problem is he doesn't, I don't think he accepts the idea that legal immigration also needs to be brought down. He thinks legal immigration is okay and likes it and, thinks we need Indian computer programmers and what have you. And that's just not true. So that's the area that I wish he read more of our material from. The good sign, though, is that I don't think he's very committed to that. Illegal immigration is more important to him than legal immigration.
Has to fight.
And the people who work for him are genuinely hard line, even on legal immigration. And so that's why I'm not too worried about what the administration's going to do. But the
Mm,
big thing that I would like the president to kind of change his rhetoric on is overall levels. That
mm,
I think because the vice president is very good on that.
mm.
Governor DeSantis, there's a bunch of people in the Senate, sort of the younger people under him, you know, 40s, 50s, ages 60 years old, those people are all real restrictionists. In other words, they
Yeah,
want numbers to come down.
to calm down. If you have 5 minutes in the Oval Office with the president tomorrow, let's say, what would be your top recommendation?
My top recommendation is to um, talk about enforcing the law against illegal immigrants, especially. Talk about that also as a jobs issue, not just a crime issue. In
Mm,
other words, find people, for instance, some kid who just got out of jail, he's training in a program to learn to work in a restaurant. And so they call these prisoner reentry programs.
mm,
And that guy's chance of getting a job once he finishes his training is way better if there's fewer illegal immigrants. And so talking about it that way, as well as the crime issue, and that's a real thing. There's illegal
mm,
immigrant criminals, they're bad, they should all go.
mm,
But there's more to it, and balancing the message with talk about how ordinary Americans, especially those who are in difficult circumstances, recovering drug addicts, single moms,
mm,
people with cognitive disabilities, like Down syndrome or something like that,
mm.
their chances of getting jobs are way better if there's fewer illegal immigrants. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a positive message to add to the crime message. That's what I would recommend if I had 5 minutes.
Mhm. This is the America First real application. Thank you so
Yep.
much, Mr. Krikorian, for this informative conversation. I was glad to have
Happy to do it. Thank you.
it.